You're such a good horse. Yes, you are. It's okay.
The air was cold, biting, and relentless. Snowflakes drifted down like tiny shards of ice, blanketing the earth in a heavy, silent white. The world around was still, as if holding its breath, waiting for anything to break the endless silence. Among the stark landscape stood a lone figure, the faintest shape in the distance, its frailty almost blending with the frozen surroundings. It was a horse, though barely recognizable as one. Emaciated, its ribs visible beneath a dull, lifeless coat, the animal seemed like a ghost of what it once was. The horse had been left alone, abandoned, its spirit and strength worn thin by the cruel hands of time. With every step, its legs trembled, as though the weight of the world pressed down on its frail body. Those who had seen it, the few who cared enough to notice, believed its chances of survival were next to nothing. Whispers of doubt echoed through the nearby towns. "It won't last much longer. It's too far gone." The horse had been given up on. Yet, there was something in its eyes, something unyielding. Despite the sharp chill of the wind and the unrelenting cold, it refused to lie down and surrender. Its gaze, though tired, was filled with a quiet defiance. For days, it stood on the edge of oblivion, teetering between life and death, as if waiting for a sign, a push, a reason to keep going. Then, just as hope seemed like a distant memory, something unexpected happened, a single, fragile step, so small, yet full of meaning. It was the first sign that perhaps, just perhaps, the horse was not ready to give up just yet. What came next would change everything. The horse's story didn't begin in the bleak, frozen wasteland where it was found. It started many miles away, in a quieter place, once filled with life and warmth. Her name had been Willow, a young filly with a coat as golden as sunlight in spring. She had lived on a farm, surrounded by the sounds of clinking hooves on the cobblestone paths, the rhythmic clatter of the barn doors opening and closing, and the laughter of children who adored her. Willow had been the pride of the farm, a prized companion of a family who had raised her from birth. But as seasons changed, so did the farm's fate. The family's fortunes crumbled, and with it, the care that Willow had once received. The owners, unable to keep up with the costs of feeding and maintaining the farm, were forced to sell off livestock, including Willow. No one warned her. She had no idea that one day, she would be part of that bargain. She was loaded onto a truck, bound for a place she couldn't understand, carried away from the only home she had ever known. Her new owner, an unkind man who had no regard for her needs, left her in a small, neglected field at the edge of a barren property. There was no shelter, no fresh water, and worst of all, no food. Days turned into weeks. Willow's ribs became more pronounced, and her once glorious coat faded to a sickly shade of brown. The people passing by whispered about her, "She's just another useless animal. She won't make it through the winter." The cruel irony of it all was that Willow was never meant to be a victim. She was meant to be strong, a beacon of beauty and grace. Yet, she was betrayed by circumstances beyond her control. Her body began to deteriorate as starvation set in, and the world around her seemed to get colder, darker, and more indifferent. But even as her energy drained, a small spark inside her refused to extinguish. Willow could still hear the memories of children laughing, and she could still remember what it felt like to run freely. But all of that seemed so distant now, as though it belonged to someone else. No one knew it yet, but a moment of transformation was coming, one that would change Willow's life forever. A turning point is a moment or event that marks a significant change in the direction of something, whether it's a person's life, a story, or even a society. It can be a positive or negative event, but its impact is profound. In this essay, I'll discuss a personal turning point in my life that completely changed the way I saw the world and myself. This moment not only shifted my perspective but also led to growth, challenges, and new opportunities. The turning point I want to discuss happened when I moved to a new school. Before that, I had spent my entire life in a small town with a tight-knit group of friends. I knew everyone, and everyone knew me. Life was simple, and I never really had to deal with big changes or challenges. I was comfortable in my small bubble, never questioning much. But everything changed the summer before high school when my parents decided to move to a bigger city for work. At first, I was excited about the idea of living in a new place. The city was larger, more modern, and full of new things to explore. But as soon as I stepped into my new school on the first day, I felt a wave of anxiety. The school was enormous, filled with hundreds of unfamiliar faces. I realized that I didn't know anyone, and I was terrified of being judged or left out. My heart raced as I walked through the hallways, feeling lost among the crowd. For the first time, I felt completely alone. I had been the outgoing, confident kid back in my old school, but now, I felt like a stranger to everyone. I didn't know how to make new friends, and I struggled to fit in. The first few weeks were rough. I spent most of my lunch breaks sitting alone, scrolling through my phone to avoid feeling awkward. I missed my old friends and the comfort of knowing exactly where I belonged. Every day felt like a challenge, and it started to affect my mood and my confidence. Then, something unexpected happened. In one of my classes, a group of students invited me to join them for a group project. They were friendly, easygoing, and, most importantly, they didn't judge me for being new. At first, I was hesitant, not used to being invited into groups so easily. But I decided to take a chance and join them. Working together on the project was a turning point. I realized that people could be kind and accepting, even if I didn't know them well. I wasn't the awkward, lonely kid I thought I was. I was someone who had something valuable to offer. From that moment on, things started to change. I began to open up more in class, participating in discussions and getting involved in school activities. Slowly, I made new friends, and my confidence started to grow again. I learned that it was okay to be vulnerable and that it was normal to feel uncertain when faced with change. But I also learned that with effort and an open mind I could create new connections and find my place in the world, even when everything felt unfamiliar. Looking back, that turning point was crucial in shaping the person I am today. It taught me the importance of stepping out of my comfort zone, embracing change, and being open to new experiences. I realized that challenges weren't things to be afraid of, but opportunities for growth. The experience showed me that while it's normal to feel uncertain in the face of change, we have the power to adapt, learn, and thrive. In conclusion, the moment I moved to a new school was a turning point that changed my life in many ways. It forced me to confront my fears and insecurities, but it also gave me the opportunity to grow as a person. That experience taught me that turning points, though often challenging, are a natural part of life. They shape who we are, how we see the world, and how we interact with others. Embracing these moments, rather than avoiding them, is the key to personal growth and success. Recovery, whether physical, emotional, or mental, is never an easy journey. It's a path filled with challenges, setbacks, and moments of doubt, but also growth, strength, and resilience. For me, the road to recovery began during a time when I was struggling with personal issues that felt overwhelming. There were days when I felt like I would never be able to overcome the hurdles in front of me, but looking back, I can see how each step, no matter how small, played a part in my eventual healing. It all started when I began feeling increasingly anxious and stressed. At first, I brushed it off as just normal teenage stress, school, friendships, and the pressure to figure out my future. But over time, those feelings became harder to ignore. My anxiety grew to the point where it began affecting my sleep, my mood, and even my physical health. I would wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, unable to breathe. During the day, I struggled to focus on anything, and the thought of facing social situations became unbearable. I felt trapped in a cycle of negative thoughts and emotions. At first, I didn't know how to deal with what I was experiencing. I tried to push through it on my own, thinking it would get better if I just ignored it. But it only worsened. That's when I realized I needed help. Admitting that I wasn't okay was the first step in my road to recovery, and it was much harder than I thought. I was embarrassed to talk about my struggles. I didn't want people to think I was weak or that I couldn't handle things. But after a lot of internal struggle, I finally reached out to a close friend and then to my parents. Talking to them was the first step in breaking the silence that had surrounded my anxiety. My parents were understanding and supportive, encouraging me to seek professional help. I began seeing a therapist who helped me understand my anxiety and taught me coping strategies to manage it. Therapy wasn't a magic fix, but it was a turning point. It gave me the tools to process my feelings in a healthy way and to recognize that my emotions didn't define me. Over time, I learned to acknowledge the things that triggered my anxiety and how to approach them without letting them control me. Alongside therapy, I started focusing on self-care. I began taking better care of my physical health by getting regular exercise, eating nutritious food, and getting enough sleep. I also made time for hobbies that I enjoyed, such as reading, painting, and spending time outdoors. These activities weren't just distractions. They helped me reconnect with myself and reminded me that there were things in life that brought me peace and joy. There were days when I felt like I wasn't making progress. I would have setbacks, feel overwhelmed, or think I was taking 2 steps back for every step forward. It was easy to get discouraged, but through it all, I kept reminding myself that recovery wasn't linear. Healing took time, and each setback was just a part of the process. Instead of letting the setbacks define me, I began seeing them as opportunities to learn more about myself and how to overcome challenges. I also leaned on my support system, friends, family, and even online communities. There were times when I didn't know how to express what I was feeling, but talking to people who understood and cared made all the difference. Having people who listened without judgment made me feel less alone in my journey. Their support was a constant reminder that I didn't have to face my struggles on my own. As the months passed, I started to notice real changes. My anxiety became more manageable, and I found myself gaining more confidence in handling stressful situations. I had learned that recovery wasn't about getting rid of anxiety or other negative feelings entirely. It was about learning how to live alongside them and not letting them control my life. I also realized that healing doesn't have a set timeline, and it was okay to take things one day at a time. Looking back on my journey, I am proud of how far I've come. The road to recovery wasn't easy, and there were times when I wanted to give up, but each step I took brought me closer to a healthier, more balanced life. I learned that asking for help is a sign of strength, not weakness, and that taking care of my mental health is just as important as taking care of my physical health. In conclusion, the road to recovery is not a straight path, and there will be obstacles along the way. However, each challenge presents an opportunity for growth, and the journey itself can teach us valuable lessons about resilience, patience, and self-compassion. I am still on this path, and while I know there will be tough days ahead, I now have the tools and the mindset to face them head-on. The road to recovery is a continuous process, but with each step, I am learning to embrace life more fully and with greater peace. Life is full of challenges, but there comes a moment in everyone's journey when they face a test that feels like it will define them. For me, that test came during my final year of high school. It wasn't just about passing exams or finishing assignments. It was about proving to myself that I could rise above fear, doubts, and uncertainty. The final test, in many ways, was a test of character. It all started when I was chosen to represent my school in a regional public speaking competition. At first, I was excited. I've always enjoyed speaking in front of others, but as the day of the competition approached, the nerves set in. I started to doubt myself. What if I messed up? What if I couldn't perform well enough? The pressure to represent my school well began to feel like a weight on my shoulders. My confidence, which I had once prided myself on, felt fragile. As the competition day grew closer, I spent hours practicing my speech. I went over it again and again, trying to perfect every word, every pause, every gesture. Despite my preparation, I still couldn't shake the fear of failure. It seemed like the entire event had become a mountain too high to climb. The night before the competition, I stayed up late, barely sleeping, overwhelmed with nerves. The next morning, as I stood backstage waiting for my turn, my heart was pounding. My hands were shaking, and the fear of forgetting my speech made my stomach churn. But then something shifted. I reminded myself that this wasn't about being perfect, it was about pushing through the fear. I had worked hard to get here, and all I could do was trust in my preparation and give my best effort. When it was finally my turn, I walked onto the stage. I looked out at the audience and took a deep breath. The nerves didn't disappear, but they became a part of me, something I could manage, not something that controlled me. I gave my speech with everything I had, and when it was over, I felt a sense of relief and accomplishment, regardless of the outcome. Though I didn't win the competition, I realized that the true victory was in overcoming my own fear. The final test wasn't about winning or losing, it was about proving to myself that I could rise to the challenge. That experience taught me that the most important tests in life are often the ones we face within ourselves. Recovery is a journey that often feels long and uncertain, but the moment when you realize you've made it through is incredibly rewarding. For me, successful recovery wasn't about an instant transformation, it was a gradual process of self-reflection, healing, and growth. It began when I finally accepted that I needed help, acknowledging the struggles I was facing with anxiety and self-doubt. Reaching out for support was the first step toward change. Over time, with the help of therapy, healthier habits, and the support of my friends and family, I learned how to manage my emotions and face challenges without letting them overwhelm me. I became more self-aware and learned to recognize the signs when things were getting too much. Most importantly, I learned to be kind to myself during setbacks, understanding that recovery is not linear. The moment I knew I had made a successful recovery wasn't when I felt perfect, but when I felt strong enough to navigate difficult situations without losing control. I realized that I had become more resilient, not because I was without flaws, but because I had learned to cope with them. My recovery wasn't just about bouncing back, it was about growing stronger and embracing life with new confidence. In conclusion, recovery, whether emotional, physical, or mental, is a journey that requires patience, self-compassion, and resilience. It's not about perfection or an instant fix, but about embracing each step, learning from setbacks, and growing stronger with time. The experiences I've gone through have taught me that the most important part of any challenge is not how quickly we overcome it, but how we rise after each fall. Through my own struggles, I've learned that healing isn't a destination, it's a process of continuous growth, and each day brings new opportunities to become a better version of ourselves.